Have you ever felt underestimated just because of who you are? What if your doctor dismissed your pain, assuming it was nothing more than an exaggeration? It was a typical busy day at a renowned hospital. The sterile white walls reflected the bustle of activity, with nurses moving quickly between rooms and the smell of antiseptic lingering in the air. In the pediatric waiting room sat an 11-year-old black girl. She sat quietly, her face calm, but her body was anything but. She had been feeling unwell for days, lightheaded, feverish, and aching. Despite the discomfort, she had learned to hide it, not wanting to burden anyone. But today, she hoped the doctor would see her for more than just another patient. She was tired of feeling dismissed. Her mother had insisted on bringing her to the hospital, concerned that something more serious might be going on. The girl didn't feel like complaining, but her mother had insisted, hoping this visit would provide some answers. She wasn't sure what to expect, but after dealing with too many instances of being ignored or misunderstood, she hoped for something different today. The door to the room opened, and in walked the doctor. Mid-40s, well-established, with an air of confidence and authority, he glanced at her briefly, then looked back at his clipboard. He didn't take a moment to study her closely, nor did he acknowledge the signs of discomfort on her face. His first impression was clear: a child, likely overreacting. "Let me guess," he began, barely looking up. "A little fever, some aches, right?" His tone was dismissive, barely more than a monotone. "It's probably nothing to worry about, just a kid thing." He waved his hand dismissively, continuing, "Kids get dramatic. You'll be fine. Just take some aspirin, drink some fluids, and rest." The girl didn't respond, though inside she felt a sharp sting. She had heard it all before: the assumptions, the dismissive tone. People always thought she was overreacting, that her pain didn't matter. But this time, it hurt more than usual. She just sat there, silent, hoping her mother's decision to bring her in would result in some real answers. Instead, the doctor was already done, thinking that a simple rest would solve everything. He gave her instructions to take aspirin and rest, barely making eye contact, before turning to leave. He was done. The visit wasn't important to him. The girl's pain didn't seem to matter. Just then, the door opened again. Her father, the owner of the hospital, stepped into the room. He had overheard everything from outside, and his presence immediately shifted the room's energy. The young girl's father wasn't just a businessman. He had been a patient advocate for years, fighting for better health care for everyone. His voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable authority in it. "I overheard your diagnosis," he began, his eyes locked on the doctor. "You seem to think that my daughter is overreacting. I'm afraid that's not acceptable." The doctor froze, caught off guard by the interruption. He stammered, I didn't mean to—" The father cut him off, his voice firm. "You didn't mean to what? Dismiss her pain because of her age and race. You're here to provide care, not to make assumptions." The doctor looked uncomfortable. He tried to defend himself, but the father wasn't having it. "She deserves the same respect and care as any other patient," he continued. "And I won't stand by while someone makes judgments about her based on her race or age." The father's eyes never left the doctor's, and the tension in the room was palpable. "I'm going to ensure she gets the care she needs immediately," the father said, turning his attention to his daughter. "You've been heard, sweetheart. We're going to take care of you now." The doctor stammered again, his face flushed with embarrassment. I was just trying to help," he said weakly. "You weren't helping," the father replied. "You were making assumptions that have no place in this hospital." The father then looked at his daughter. "You're going to be okay," he reassured her, gently placing his hand on her shoulder. The doctor, now realizing his mistake, stood still, humiliated. The young girl's father had set the record straight, and it was clear that the doctor would be facing the consequences of his actions. The girl, although shaken, felt a rush of relief wash over her. For the first time, her pain was being taken seriously. Her father had not only ensured that she would receive proper medical attention, but he had also given her a voice in the process. As the father made arrangements for her care, the doctor quickly left the room, clearly chastened by the events that had just unfolded. The girl, now reassured by her father's presence, sat back in her chair, finally feeling seen and valued. This time, she wouldn't be dismissed, and her father would make sure of that. The 11-year-old girl sitting in the pediatric waiting room was bright, hard-working, and full of ambition. Normally a healthy child, she had always been the type to stay focused and curious about the world around her. She loved to read, particularly about the natural world, and often dreamed of becoming a scientist one day. It was a dream that seemed distant for a girl from a family that, while financially stable, was not rich. They had always worked hard to make ends meet and to provide her with every opportunity. However, despite their hard work and modest success, the girl and her family had always found themselves navigating a world that often overlooked them, especially because of their race. She had dealt with prejudice both inside and outside of school. People often made assumptions about her based on her skin color, assuming she was less capable or less intelligent. Though these experiences hurt, they never deterred her. Instead, she used them as fuel to prove to herself that she could overcome any obstacle. Her father, a quiet and powerful figure, had instilled in her a sense of dignity and strength. He was the owner of the hospital where she was being treated, but he never boasted about it. He remained humble, never flaunting his wealth or status. He was a man who believed in treating everyone with the utmost respect, no matter their background or job title. His humility was something he had passed down to his daughter, and it was one of the most important lessons she had learned. Even though her father was a successful businessman, he understood that respect and kindness were more valuable than any amount of money or prestige. Her father's quiet strength was part of what made him so admired in his community. He believed in treating people with dignity, and he had done so all his life. It was something that he hoped his daughter would carry with her as she grew up. Even though his family had access to wealth and privilege, he was determined to raise her in a way that would encourage compassion, fairness, and empathy. In a world that too often sought to divide people, he wanted to make sure his daughter would always treat everyone equally, regardless of their race, class, or position. On the other hand, the doctor who was supposed to treat her that day was a man of privilege and entitlement. In his mid-40s, he had spent the majority of his career in positions of power, and his confidence bordered on arrogance. He had always been dismissive of those who came from less affluent backgrounds, especially black patients and their families. To him, their concerns were often nothing more than a nuisance. He assumed that people like him, wealthy, well-educated, and powerful, knew what was best for everyone else. Throughout his career, he had built a reputation as a surgeon who excelled in his field but failed to truly listen to his patients. His dismissive nature had earned him the disdain of many, but due to his long tenure and remarkable skills in the operating room, his behavior had been tolerated by the hospital. His reputation, however, extended beyond his surgical expertise. Over the years, he had become known for diagnosing based on his own stereotypes and assumptions, rather than looking at the full picture. He frequently brushed off concerns from patients, particularly black patients, as if their experiences and discomforts were simply overreactions. The doctor's dismissive attitude had helped create a toxic culture within the hospital, where people were often judged based on their appearance or background rather than treated with the care and respect they deserved. This culture had gone unchecked for far too long, and many patients had suffered as a result. Yet, due to his status and success, the doctor felt untouchable, a belief that had been reinforced by years of being allowed to operate without scrutiny. In the waiting room that day, the young girl was about to face this very prejudice. Little did the doctor know, the girl he dismissed without a second thought would soon become the very person who would challenge his biases and assumptions. The path to that moment was one of courage, resilience, and the deep-seated belief that respect should be given to everyone, regardless of their race or position in society. It was a lesson the doctor had yet to learn, and one that would soon be forced upon him. The girl explains her symptoms carefully, trying her best to convey her discomfort. "I feel dizzy and weak, and I've been so tired lately," she says softly, her voice carrying a mix of concern and uncertainty. "My head hurts, and I just don't feel like myself." She hopes that her words will be heard, that someone will understand how much pain she's in, even if it's hard for her to fully articulate it. But the doctor, barely looking up from his clipboard, scoffs and dismissively says, "It's probably just a phase, or maybe your parents are making you anxious. Children these days love to exaggerate." His voice is cold, and his words are laced with a dismissiveness that she can feel down to her core. He doesn't even take the time to look at her properly, to assess her symptoms in any meaningful way. Instead, he brushes her off as if she is just another child making a fuss over nothing. He continues, still not meeting her eyes. "Just take some pain relievers, drink some fluids, and rest. You'll be fine in no time." The words sting more than she can express. She had hoped that this time the doctor would listen to her, that she would finally get the care and attention she needed. But instead, she's treated like she's just another overreacting child. He doesn't even acknowledge the possibility that there might be something wrong. The casual dismissal of her pain as something unimportant, something insignificant, is an all too familiar feeling. The girl, holding back tears, nods quietly, not knowing what else to say. She feels humiliated and frustrated, yet she doesn't have the strength to argue. Her symptoms are brushed off as nothing more than an inconvenience, something to be ignored. She knows all too well how it feels to be dismissed and to have her pain overlooked, especially because of her race and age. These prejudices she faces don't just happen in one place, but in so many areas of her life. They've followed her in school, in the community, and now even in the hospital. Her father, who works hard to provide for their family, always tells her to stay strong in the face of adversity. But it's hard when it feels like the world keeps telling her that she doesn't matter, that her voice, her experience, isn't worth listening to. And yet, she stays quiet, swallowing down the feeling of injustice and humiliation. The nurse enters, ready to carry out the doctor's orders. She administers the basic pain relievers, handing the girl the medicine without a word. The girl takes it, swallowing it down with a mixture of resentment and resignation. She knows it won't fix what's wrong, but it's all that she can do for now. She remains seated in the sterile, cold room, holding back her emotions as best as she can. She wonders why she even bothered to come here, why she had hoped that someone, anyone, might actually take her seriously today. She knows deep down that her father is the one who will fight for her, but in that moment she feels small, unheard, and invisible. The doctor's words linger in the air, leaving behind a sting that won't easily fade. Her pain is real, but for now, it doesn't seem to matter to anyone. It isn't the first time she's been dismissed like this, and it certainly won't be the last. But each time it happens, it cuts just a little deeper, and the weight of it becomes harder to bear. For now, she sits in the quiet, trying to hold back the tears that threaten to fall. She just wants to be seen, to be heard, to be understood. Later that evening, the girl's father, who was the owner of the hospital, arrived at the facility after a long day of meetings. He had just finished a business call and was unaware of the earlier incident with his daughter. His daughter had chosen not to worry him with the details, not wanting to burden him, but her mother had noticed the tearful expression on her face and immediately called him. Concerned for his daughter's well-being, the father decided to check on her personally. As he walked through the hallways toward her room, the hospital staff began to whisper among themselves. The news had quickly spread through the hospital. The doctor, with his dismissive behavior, had just insulted the daughter of the hospital's owner. No one had known who the girl was when the doctor had treated her poorly earlier that day. Now, the staff was beginning to realize the gravity of the situation. The girl's father, a calm and measured man, entered the hospital quietly, his expression serious. He was deeply disappointed, but his control over his emotions was evident as he walked down the hallway. He had heard about the doctor's behavior and was determined to address it. The doctor had already been summoned to his office, unaware of the storm he was about to face. When the doctor entered the office, he was met with the father's cold gaze. The air in the room grew thick with tension. The doctor was caught off guard, not knowing how to handle the situation. His arrogance and dismissive attitude had worked in his favor for years, but this time he had misjudged the consequences of his actions. "I heard you treated my daughter poorly today," the father said, his voice steady but laced with disappointment. The doctor stammered, trying to find words to explain himself, but it was clear that he knew he had made a significant error. He had no idea who the young girl was when he dismissed her symptoms and insulted her. But now, facing the wrath of the hospital's owner, his arrogance was fading quickly. Before the doctor could even attempt to justify his behavior, the father continued, "I own this hospital. You disrespected my daughter, and now you will face the consequences." The doctor's face turned pale as the realization of his mistake fully sank in. He had insulted the wrong person, and now he would have to deal with the fallout. The father's calm demeanor only made the situation more intimidating. The doctor had not only made a mistake in his diagnosis, but he had also shown a lack of respect for the daughter of the man who owned the very hospital he worked at. It was a fatal combination. The father's disappointment was evident, and the doctor knew there was no way to talk his way out of this one. The father had already made up his mind, and the consequences would be severe. As the doctor left the office, his mind raced, but the father remained composed. His daughter's well-being came first, and he would ensure that she was always treated with the respect she deserved. The doctor's behavior had revealed a deeper issue, an unchecked attitude that needed to be corrected. It would be the last time such behavior would go unaddressed in his hospital. The doctor, stunned by the father's words, tried to backtrack. his face flushing with embarrassment. He stammered out an apology, his voice shaking as he realized the gravity of his actions. I didn't know. I didn't mean it that way," he muttered, attempting to justify himself. But the father's stern expression showed no sign of leniency. "It's too late for apologies," the father said firmly, his voice unwavering. "Your disrespect toward my daughter will not be tolerated. You are no longer welcome here." He stood up from his desk, his presence commanding the room. "Leave my office, now." The doctor's arrogance crumbled in an instant, his confidence shattered by the father's words. He could see that there was no negotiating his way out of this. The authority in the father's voice made it clear that this was not a matter up for debate. The doctor nodded slowly, defeated, and turned to leave without another word. As the doctor left the office, the father made a quick decision. He immediately called a meeting with the hospital's staff. The time for change had come, and it would not be delayed. As the staff gathered in the conference room, a quiet buzz of nervous whispers filled the air. Everyone knew the doctor had been untouchable for years, and now his downfall had begun. The father entered the room, his presence commanding the attention of every individual present. The doctor stood in the back, looking uneasy as the father addressed the group. "This behavior, this racism and disrespect is unacceptable in this hospital," the father said, his tone measured but stern. "It has no place here, and it will not be tolerated." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the room. The doctor stood in silence, unable to meet anyone's gaze. The father continued, his voice gaining strength. "We pride ourselves on being a place where every patient is treated with dignity and respect. It's time for that pride to be reflected in the way we treat each other, the way we treat our patients, and the way we treat everyone who walks through these doors." The staff nodded, some looking uncomfortable, others with faces of quiet agreement. It was clear that this moment had been a long time coming, and the change needed to be more than just superficial. The father promised that the hospital would take concrete steps to address these issues. New policies would be implemented to prioritize diversity, inclusion, and respect for all individuals. The hospital would become a place where equality wasn't just a slogan, but a reality for both staff and patients. As the meeting concluded, the father's voice rang with clarity and authority. "I expect nothing less than the highest standard of care and respect from every member of this hospital. We will do better. And if any of you feel that you cannot follow this path, I will not hesitate to make changes." The doctor, now a shadow of the man he once was, slunk out of the room. He had been fired on the spot, and his career, built on arrogance and prejudice, had come to an abrupt end. The father's actions sent a clear message to the entire hospital staff. There were consequences for disrespect and racism, no matter your position. The father's leadership had set the tone for the future of the hospital. His unwavering commitment to his daughter's well-being had not only ensured that she received the care she deserved, but it had also shown the entire institution that love, respect, and family came first. He had taken a firm stance on the issue of racial injustice and had made it clear that his hospital would always stand for fairness, no matter the status or privilege of the individuals involved. As the father walked out of the conference room, he felt a sense of pride in the decision he had made. He had done what was right, not just for his daughter, but for the entire hospital. It was a lesson in leadership that would resonate throughout the walls of the hospital for years to come. The hospital, now under the father's renewed vision, begins to transform in ways that could not have been imagined before. The toxic culture of discrimination that once festered behind the walls of the institution starts to fade, replaced by an environment of respect, inclusion, and care for every individual, regardless of their background. Staff and patients alike begin to feel truly valued, as the hospital becomes a beacon of fairness where compassion isn't just a value, it's a requirement. The girl, empowered by her father's swift action and unwavering commitment to justice, grows up with the profound understanding that respect and fairness are not privileges, they are non-negotiable. She carries this knowledge with her, and as she matures, she reflects on the strength of her father's leadership, not just as a businessman, but as a father who ensured that his daughter's dignity was never compromised. Her father's actions created an environment where people like her, regardless of their age, race, or position, would never again be treated as invisible or less important. The hospital, once an institution that overlooked certain patients, became a place where equity and care were at the forefront of every decision. As the years pass, the girl's father doesn't stop at transforming the hospital. He expands his commitment to fairness and equity into his other business ventures, ensuring that his values permeate everything he does. His influence grows within the community as people begin to take note of the changes he's implemented, both in his personal and professional life. He doesn't just talk about the need for equality, he lives it, embodying the very principles he advocates for. His efforts inspire others in the community to stand against injustice, creating a ripple effect that leads to a more inclusive and fair society for everyone. The girl, now a few years older, walks confidently through the hospital, a place where she used to feel small and unnoticed. Today, she walks with a sense of pride and respect, knowing that her father's dedication to fairness has made this a better place for everyone. The lessons of equality, justice, and leadership that her father imparted to her are now deeply ingrained in her, and she feels empowered to carry them forward into her own future. Her father's actions have laid the groundwork for a world where she will never have to question her worth or let anyone diminish her value. She knows that the lessons of kindness and fairness he taught her will continue to guide her through every challenge she faces. The final scene shows her walking with her father through the halls of the hospital. She looks up at him, admiring his calm strength and the unwavering determination with which he has shaped their world. As they walk, she reflects on all the times he stood up for what was right, not just for his family, but for everyone who needed a voice. She knows that his example will stay with her for the rest of her life, a beacon of what it means to be truly compassionate, fair, and just. Her father, looking at her with pride, knows that the work they've done together has made a difference. But he also understands that true leadership isn't about having the power to make decisions. It's about knowing when to stand up, speak out, and protect what's right. He has set an example for his daughter and the world, teaching them that integrity and justice must always come first. Final line. True leadership is not about power. It's about knowing when to stand up and protect what's right.